So I've been thinking about this a little bit now. Right? So I've gone through what I've needed to say thus far about um, the actual scenario being presented to us with the Kirk event. The matter, the matter of all the anomalies involved, how things are all sewed uh, with deliberate suspicion, and you're ignoring, and like people want to ignore the suspicions for the angle of conspiracy theory that they think is correct, or the ant. Well, granted, the lone wolf narrative is always the anti-theory, right? There is no theory. Somebody was shot. Here's a shooter. Um, Here's a string of information that I assure you is contextually uh, um, accurate, and therefore, because we got an indictment, we know we got our guy, right? And we don't know shit. All we know is that a guy's father handed his son over to the feds. That's all that we know, is that a father turned in his son. That's all that we fucking know. And if this guy was living with his roommate, who he was in love with, and he did it for him, because it's this situation allegedly, why did he go home and tell his parents like that? Why did he think his parents would approve, per se, compared to others, right? Like, I get it. This could be incel shit, right? He could be he could be an incel who, is, he might be a trapped in the closet incel, right? Like, we've been dealing with the trannies who are in liberal world who are allowed to be all rainbow. If he is one of those types from in that world, from inside the conservative culture, he's probably going to be ultra apprehensive if he doesn't have the social safety net that others would, because you're an incel. You could be, I think that you can be an incel among your own, right? Because, like, you're typically an incel, but you can get together when you get the time to get off the internet to meet people in real life, and then you're going out, you're meeting other people, LGBTQA, and looking for love in all the fluid places, right? And so it's it's a social divide between you either accept gender fluid people, you either accept the gender fluidity of gender fluid people, or you just accept gender fluid people as long as they're not trying to groom you. And that's the dichotomy, right? That's what the right wants, because the right is very pro, is actually very pro conservative, like, persons of whatever sexuality, right? There are trans that are just adults that aren't into grooming, that became trans from their own, deep interpersonal development, and is just where they're at. And I'm not going to sit there and say I know better about what's going on inside of them from all of my doctrines that I source my own personal inner knowing from. Not that no, the higher force is the source, but where but where life, as I find myself, provides me on my quest for knowledge. That's probably a better way of saying it. But anyway, because like right now everybody is just like, oh, you shot the nice guy, here we go, we're not, no more nice guys talking to you. It's just like, first off, shut the fuck up. you didn't send Charlie Kirk anywhere. You weren't gonna do anything. You would have just sat there and not known a goddamn thing about anything, and then Charlie Kirk was presented to you to think. Okay? All right, and it's Charlie Kirk gave you some good thoughts because Charlie Kirk liked to think. All right, so don't act like Charlie Kirk was your appointed emissary. Charlie Kirk started doing what he wanted to do with his organization, and you liked it, you agreed with it, and you invested into it. But Charlie Kirk, he himself, he came out of his own woodwork. And by his own woodwork, I mean he came out of Donald Trump's fucking pocket because his father was an architect on Trump Tower. Go look up your facts. Ooh, I like how you can only see my eyes. It's kind of spooky and mysterious. But anyway, so, no. Well, what Christians are going to do is what they always fucking do. They're going to give sympathetic magic to the state, and then the state has to deliver in some way, shape, or form an appeasing answer to them. And the state is not going to do certain things. It is going to do certain things. And just like the left sometimes gets what they think they want, they will give the right what they think they want because they want to surrender to authority, because that's why they got on their knees and prayed instead of activism or something, right? And then we mock, right-wing activism because it doesn't seem to accomplish anything. It typically doesn't harm anybody, but it doesn't accomplish anything, right? Because typically they're out there throwing some moral rhetoric at you, and even though there may be a kind of a semblance of rational agreement with the moral rhetoric, it's tied to a religious side of things, which is rejecting the whole thing. And there's a combination of not understanding the complexities of where conservatives come from. And the only reason why people don't understand the complexities of where liberals come from is because both talk in ways that are, they're cringy in-group vernaculars is where you get to fucking understand them. You have to sit there and you have to listen through all of their terminology that they built, right? Their idea is freedom is that terminology is dictated to everyone to be echoed back to them, and that's how they are free, is when you acknowledge the way that they speak by speaking the way that they speak, which is trying to take control of your voice, and they don't quite understand that. And it's by and large not in most Christians to do things on this false equivalency. But there are some Christians who can badly represent doing the right thing, and they will gladly play the part, just like the way that dude in the Ku Klux Klan would play his part. If we remember, like every time a Republican was off script, they would throw this guy out there to ruin him. Like, they weaponized him and said, like, "Ah, look, you see, he's got the endorsement of such and such. He's a Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan," right? And so that's it. They don't have to fucking have an argument. They just have to have a scapegoat, right? Because having an argument is having a challenge to your mind, and they have weak minds and they want weak minds. Dark sorcery does not cultivate in the strong-minded. So, I don't believe that you're going to see anybody in government do anything to avenge any of your noble characters. I mean, just fucking remember. Donald Trump is sitting there putting Epstein list people in the White House and probably going to pardon key players because maybe the Mossad wants Miss Maxwell to live. I don't know. But if you ask me, Maxwell is alive because she is direct Mossad, where Epstein was Mossad asset via their relationship. That's what it looks like to me. That's pretty much what anybody paying attention to all of the details and understands the Mossad factor, right? And nobody wants to connect the dots to other things because naturally, if Charlie Kirk can have the Israel spell broken, because that's why he's dead. He verbalized, he let the world know that, hold on a second, I'm still friends with Israel, but my friend's done wrong. That was Charlie Kirk's position before he died. My friends have done a bad thing. My friends have to be held accountable. That was basically Charlie Kirk's position before they took his voice. Right? One of a handful of things I agree with. Even if I disagreed with him on all sorts of things. If he wasn't in the midst of doing things that a bad person does, I would be deeply invested and interested in justice for that person. Right? Because they may have been an impressive character. They may have had an impressive following. It doesn't have to be a large following. It just has to be a quality following that is a following. Like, I got quality people that, quote, follow me. I love all you guys. But I don't think they would leave the impression, right? I don't have a bunch of Zarelath warriors like that. And nor do I really cultivate that with this channel. Right? I would have to put way more particular work that made you feel way more invested in me. And I know I don't give that feeling, because I understand that feeling now when I look at others who make content the way I do, how I feel about that, my relationship with them versus those that do more production-y things, which also can change many an equation of how I end up having my relationships with other content creators, right? How closely our beats as far as what we think about how we write goes, and the focus into the production. Anyway, that's offbeat. But and by the way, this is a work shirt. Don't confuse me for somebody who likes baseballs or gives a fuck about the team. This is just the shirt to get fucked up at work. Now I'm gonna have to tell somebody says like, oh, the Orioles, just a work shirt, bro. I don't give two fucks. But anyway, the response, the biggest thing about the response that they have to address is going to be transcendent of Charlie Kirk, because now people are just, the Mossad is an Epstein factor, the Mossad is a Promise Software factor, it's a Charlie Kirk factor, it's several other aspects of things. And you've got various Jewish factions in the fucking world, and some of them are Zionists that secretly approve of the Mossad, and then there are Zionists who openly approve of the Mossad or disavow them. Then there's people that aren't Zionists, that they got no idea because they're not conspiracy theorists. There's all sorts of different ways you slice it with this massive group of people, some of which are of crypto persuasion in the Jewish mix. And so this is an enemy that is embedded in the deep state, has free range in the deep state, and may in fact be holding the true power of the sovereign United States hostage, where America is still legally, lawfully, spiritually sovereign, but its blind corruption compromises all that, and it is in a state of allowing Israel all these things. And Israel needs to have that influence over us because we're the deciding factor in what forces are regularly threatening them and not. So that way threats are mitigated to what the state of Israel can handle alone, as opposed to it being a larger scale conflict for Israel alone, you know? Because typically when it's a on the border dispute, a neighboring country dispute, you'll notice that, typically Israel doesn't get any kind of aid outside of covert aid that can be proved and talked about but is officially denied, right? So that's one aspect. That's fine. But I don't think that we are looking at um, like all of a sudden um, Christian militias and stuff patrolling the streets, right? Because there's no conservatives under regular oppression right now. Conservatives have to worry about the outlier that comes into their world, especially one that they can confuse and exploit, and exploit their openness towards all sorts of people, whether that be for religious purposes, civic purposes, or just a general social disposition, depending on your kind of Christian, just like depending on your kind of Jew or your kind of Muslim, for that matter. Although we don't see that so much, even with the immigration issue, and even then, you're obviously, like, you got to remember, the Muslims that are in your country are the Muslims that were rejected from their countries, and so they're all Muslim, or they're all Middle Eastern, and being Muslim doesn't mean anything, because they're still practicing in the manner of my morality is whatever, I'm doing all the ritual work to forgive me of the sins I am committing. And if you can be convinced that your righteous and good God has forgiven you for your sins just because of a simple thing, of a small sacrifice, which is usually just your time with with a person saying some magic words or something to this effect, you see what I'm saying, right? This is also why, like, I think that Christianity was cheapened. When we abandoned the concept of or when we instituted faith alone, right? And there was no works, right? There was nothing to give you a sense of no, you can't just not be evil. You also have to do good. And the more that you're doing good, it doesn't mean you're above fucking suspicion, but it means that, you're typically not in an unrighteous position in the way that you live your life, right? With the exception of what you do in the shadows. And if you're not transgressing under natural law, then yeah, those are forgivable sins, because if there's no transgression and we're just talking about your simple pursuit of the desires of the carnal in different ways, like me with my pleasure of cannabis is one desire of the carnal, for example, that if I really felt like I needed God to worry about my level of stray, because nobody thinks that you enjoying the carnal is a deciding factor in you going to hell. It's where the transgression is in reality. They just say that when you're a non-Christian, because they don't have any faith that you can control yourself, because allegedly, because they're not used to having competition. They're not used to, now the Catholic and the Protestant have to compete with all these other traditions that are pulling you into, all sorts of different, purity and righteousness rituals. And so the conservatives are just going to make certain personal cultural decisions. They're not going to go out into the liberal world because, there are, there are conservatives that live in those liberal worlds, and they're going to maybe do something, but they're not going to do anything crazy like what you're thinking, because they're just a small group doing things from their more cosmopolitan kind of thing or whatever, right? That's that, like you can't like over here in the Northeast, same literal same fucking community as me is, quite frankly, and quite frankly, you know like that's a conservative in a liberal semi-urban culture. But there's nothing like, despite liberalism around you, it's like that's not so much the thing, and you don't see it so much. Like, they want to go after all the woke people like they're a declining fucking subculture. They're not going to be much of a mark. They're going to be more of a unicorn moving forward, because they're starting to realize the fucking reality of the surgeries they've been doing, and it's kind of shaken them to the core about their whole ideology, which was banking on the promise that the surgery was actually physiologically transformative for them on a core code level, and it's not. It's just butchery, turning you into a mockery of the divine feminine. And it's sad. It's fucking sad is what it is. So you'll see, like, you don't need a police presence with like white woke people unless they're rioting. Unfortunately, because of the general level of lower class behavior, which is an extremely large portion of mostly the black community, you do need that for how they've been raised, and the personal choices that they're making, and the hostilities, and the black people that know the difference. It's not that they're happy about seeing a police state roll through. But they are happy that their lives aren't in danger anymore, and they're not interested in contributing to. Look, it's an emergency situation, like prolonged insurrectionist behavior, rioting, long-term destruction of communities and things like that. That unfortunately is a real reason. It's not a police state for the sake of whatever. It's sad that it's been allowed to be instigated, and people have accepted the offer of, I want to have bad behavior and then irrationally argue when other people get what they wanted, which is to have protection from me and my bad behavior. And then everybody who wants protection from me and my bad behavior is the bad guy. And I'm going to make up some magic words in politics to settle that argument, because that's what they thought the mind and the world that they were going to emerge into was going to be. Anyway, I gotta suit up for work. I'm late. Catch you later.